Think of electric currents flowing in the turn of a switch, lighting up your room, or of being able to speak to someone a continent away using a mobile phone. Science impacts your lives and mine in ways we've come to take for granted and don't even notice most of the time. But figuring out that many of the diseases that afflict humans come from organisms that are small enough only to be seen under a microscope was a truly profound discovery. I'd like to tell you about the role of science in our understanding of one such disease, COVID-19. This pandemic will likely be the single defining public health event of our lifetimes, possibly even the century. The idea that some diseases can be contagious or can move from person to person is an old one. The ancient Indians, Greeks and Persians all knew this. Persian and Arab physicians, at around the time of the Great Plague in Europe, suggested that small organisms, microorganisms, could transmit the disease. The idea of quarantining was first suggested by Ibn Sina, or Avicenna as he's known in the Western world, about 1,000 years ago. The ability to actually see bacteria had to wait for a few centuries more, till microscopes were developed. Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch understood that a large number of diseases were caused by bacteria. They created what we think of as the modern germ theory of disease. So what do we know about COVID-19 and how do we know it? From early December of 2019, doctors in the Chinese city of Wuhan had begun reporting cases of patients who came to hospital with a fever, a cough, and breathlessness. These are typical symptoms of pneumonia, a disease we understand. Some of these patients had to be admitted to an ICU while others died, despite all efforts to save them. On the 31st of December, the Chinese government officially told the World Health Organization, or the WHO, of an outbreak of a disease which resembled pneumonia but whose origin was unknown. The patients showed no sign of harboring any bacterium that could cause this disease. In the absence of any idea about what caused the disease, doctors were at a loss to treat it. However, it was soon clear that whatever it was, the disease was infectious. It could move from person to person. The idea that there was another type of microorganism, one that could also cause diseases but was different from bacteria, had to wait till the turn of the 19th century. The first virus was found in studies of the tobacco mosaic disease that affected tobacco plants. The fact that it was caused by something much smaller than a bacterium was shown by a fact that it could travel through the pores of a filter that were too small, that were much smaller than could allow for the passage of bacteria. Viruses can't be seen using normal microscopes. This had to wait for the invention of the electron microscope in 1931. We know that viruses are responsible for a number of diseases we've heard about. HIV/AIDS, yellow fever, measles, and smallpox are among them. But could the mysterious disease affecting patients in Wuhan come from a virus? Was it a known virus? Or was it a new virus? To identify this new disease as caused by a new virus, one that was not part of the standard set of known viruses that cause diseases in humans, took just a further 4 days. By January 4th, we knew what was causing the new disease that seemed to spread rapidly among people. It was a novel virus belonging to a family of viruses called coronaviruses because of their crown-like shape. Epidemiologists, who are scientists who study the spread of diseases in populations, then ask the question, how was the disease moving between people? For this, they had to painstakingly examine the possible routes the virus could take in moving from someone infected with the disease to someone who had not been exposed yet. For example, was the disease transmitted through water or through direct physical contact? Or scarier still, was it transmitted through the air, through the small droplets that emerge whenever we cough? This is detective work. Epidemiologists needed to establish who became infected in successive circles around the patients, family members who were in close physical contact with them, a visitor who spent time in their rooms but didn't touch them or approach them closely, the doctors and nurses who dealt with them at various levels of proximity. All of this added up to the conclusion that this was a viral disease that spread rapidly through the air from person to person. Side by side, a worldwide effort began to understand more about the virus. As two biologists, Jean and Peter Medawar, wrote in 1977, a virus is simply a piece of bad news wrapped up in protein. The bad news refers to the genetic material inside the virus. This could be a DNA or an RNA molecule in general, but specifically an RNA molecule in the case of COVID-19. Our bodies are made up of atoms, and atoms form molecules. The periodic table of elements currently lists about 116 elements, but of them only 92 are found in their natural state on Earth. Of these 92, only about 20 are found in our bodies, but even most of these are found in very small quantities. We are largely made up, around 99%, of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. It's a very large number of combinations of these four elements and the many ways they can bind with each other to create long molecules with complex shapes that gives biology its immense diversity. So understanding a virus and what it's made up of requires that we must know that all our material world is made up of atoms. We can understand the ways in which atoms come together to form molecules, in which they bond together to form molecules, and that we understand the functions of these molecules well enough to be able to predict what they might do or how they might function. This comes from many decades and centuries of trying to understand the fundamental building blocks of matter and the laws that govern them, taking them apart and putting them back again together, finding ways of understanding things that are too small to see with the naked eye or even with an ordinary microscope. That's indeed the miracle of physics and of chemistry. Back to the story. By January 9th, about a month or so after the first cases began to be received at Wuhan hospitals, and a mere 10 days after China informed the WHO of a new and hitherto unknown disease, the genetic sequence of the virus, a description of the RNA inside, was known. With that, we had entered a new phase in our understanding of the virus. We knew how it was made. To understand the route from a sequence to a structure, the virus itself, small as it is, relies on about 60 years of understanding of molecular biology. This is biology as understood from the point of view of the molecules that take part in biological processes. Watson and Crick describe the structure of the DNA molecule that governs heredity. DNA sequences, which are shorthand for how we think about the content and the construction of DNA molecules, contain instructions for making a different set of molecules, the protein molecules that make up much of our body. The virus itself contains a related molecule of RNA, but that is bounded in a sheath, as it were, of protein, capped with an unusual crown-like structure that hooks onto cells as it prepares to infect them. Armed with the knowledge of the instruction set of the virus, the content of the RNA inside it, we can do something of immense importance. Already, even before the discovery of the germ theory of disease, the importance of vaccinations was known. The idea of using dried scabs derived from infected smallpox patients to protect uninfected ones was part of the Indian, Middle Eastern, African, and Chinese traditions. And Edward Jenner had the idea of using such methods to inoculate against smallpox. How vaccines work needs explanation. Our bodies are finely tuned to identify the invader from the resident. When a microorganism enters from outside, the immune system hunts down the invading bacterium or virus, disabling it and then chopping it into pieces. It then ensures that a record of these pieces is maintained, encoded into the shapes of complex molecules called antibodies that recognize and inactivate specific pieces of virus. Other parts of the immune system ensure that the response is swifter and more effective the next time the virus is encountered. This is called immune memory. Vaccinations mimic this process. They supply the external pieces to the immune system that we all carry so that we can train it to recognize the intact bacterium or virus when it actually infects us, ramping up the body's defenses as fast as possible in order to deal with it. Once we identify the virus and figure out what it's made of, we can make vaccines that we can give healthy people to protect them against the disease. And we know now that vaccines work. The fact that we have vanquished smallpox, that polio is close to being eradicated, and that measles affects far fewer children than it did even 50 years ago is testament to that fact. So, right from the middle of January, the race for vaccines against COVID-19 began across the world. By July, we had the first candidate vaccines. Right now, a little more than a year since COVID-19 came to the attention of the world, we have a number of vaccines, two of which are being made and distributed within India right now. The fact that we have a vaccine to an entirely new disease within a year of identifying it is truly remarkable. Just compare this to the time it typically takes a vaccine to be ready to be distributed. In total, a vaccine often takes more than 10 years to reach the stage where you can give it to healthy people. It took 25 years to secure one for the rotavirus that causes diarrheal disease in children. Where was science involved? At every step. From identifying how COVID-19 was transmitted between people, to understanding where it might have come from, to deciphering the structure of the virus never encountered before, to designing a vaccine from scratch to protecting against it. All of these built on the work of many generations of scientists who created the body of knowledge that we could actually use. What part of the story of COVID-19 do I consider the most important? What is the model that I'd like you to take away? The idea is that as scientists, we build on the work of others, work done in often unrelated contexts and in different fields. We can design precise polymerase chain reaction or PCR reactions for the virus that causes COVID-19, built on amplifying pieces of the RNA that make up the virus. This comes from a completely different study, that of bacteria that live in extreme environments such as in undersea vents. We understand the individual atoms that make up viruses because of quantum mechanics. We understand how and why viruses mutate because we understand evolution. We trust science precisely because every part of what we know, from physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, medicine, etc., must fit sensibly together for the whole to make sense. Every little brick, each little contribution inscribed with a different name, contributes to forming something larger, until finally there is a towering structure that soars ever upward, dwarfing every little piece, every minor accomplishment. In that grand structure of science, built entirely through the work of humans, there is unity, truth, and a certain beauty.